There's a term I learned from Parker Palmer that really helps me called functional atheism. What that means is playing God. And I fall into that often. And that is when I imagine that if I don't do it, it won't get done. And it's the arrogance of trying to be all things to all people. And as I said, I just confess that often I fall into that trap. What I find, and one of the things I learned from Greenleaf, who incidentally chose not to fly, not because he was afraid of flying, but he knew he needed the time to meditate. So he took the train and used those days going and coming well to be very reflective. And he really taught me to expect the answers to find me. You can't force it. And the same is true with creative problem solving. You know, you can't say, I'm going to be creative in the next 3 minutes. There are things you can do to invite creativity, but you can't time it, force it. And so I think the greatest responsibility, Greenleaf has a quote where he says, the true servant leader starts inside of oneself to find solutions, not out there. It's not about fixing other people. It's about transforming yourself. And I think the biggest responsibility and the hardest one is to stay balanced. You know, to do the things that keep my life in balance, to walk daily. I practice yoga daily in a yoga class when I'm in Dallas for an hour and a half. But in my room, if I'm traveling, I meditate, I journal, I read. I'm vegan. It's a spiritual choice. When I learned that 16 people can be fed from the same food stuff it takes to feed one meat eater, I thought, you know, all my life I've cared about all the starving people in the world, and 3 times a day I can make a difference for 15 other mouths. And I don't say that as any of these as the choices others should make, but for me, to set priorities, to have the courage to say no to some things, get clear about what I can do and what I can't do, what I shouldn't do. One of the things that helps me is realizing the 2 things I love most, teaching and speaking, I learned because someone else said no or couldn't. When I was a little kid growing up in a small Methodist church, the minister was doing one of those impassioned pleas to the congregation for Sunday school teachers, and he was talking to parents saying, you know, we need some adults for these kids' classes, and everyone was sitting on their hands and you know, trying to be invisible. And so I was 12 years old, and I raised my hand and walked down to the front, and he couldn't say, go sit down, kid. He didn't know what to say, but no one else said anything, so I started teaching a Sunday school class when I was 12, and I'm sure that they were just kind of, what do we do about this? But I never knew I shouldn't or couldn't. And I remember many years later, or some years later, I went to a PTA meeting. It was a stormy night, and in the hall I could hear the president and the principal wringing their hands saying, the speaker Colin's been in an auto accident and can't be here. What in the world are we going to do? And I thought for a few minutes, and I thought, well, I would be very happy to talk to the group. I think I could do something that might be worthwhile. So I volunteered, and again, how could they say no? And I've been speaking ever since. But that helped me realize that, again, it's arrogance and ego. It feels very good to get to do all these things, and we flatter ourselves when we jump in and say yes, yes, yes. But really the question, who are you saying no to when you say yes? And to think about our energy and our talents as our sacred gift, and how are we going to invest that? But we're not the only one.